People don't say that they dislike introverts. That would, sound bad. Instead, they say things like, you are too quiet, you're hard to read, why don't you talk anymore, or why don't you talk more, or you're kind of distant. And what this really means is you don't make me feel comfortable. And that's kind of the part that nobody likes to talk about because most people don't dislike introverts for who they are. They dislike introverts for what introverts don't give them. Introverts aren't people that give you instant validation. They don't give you consistent or constant feedback, and they don't perform socially on command. And in this world right now where everybody's so performative and addicted to noise, that solace in who they are kind of feels threatening to the mass majority of people. We live in a world and we live in a culture that rewards visibility. The loudest voice in the room is assumed to be the most confident. The person who talks the most is assumed to be the most competent. And the one who's always on is assumed to be the most likable. So when someone shows up calm, reserved, observant, it short circuits people's expectations. Humans are wired to read social cues pretty quickly. That's kind of how we judge people. So you're looking for eye contact, you're looking for facial reactions, verbal affirmation, nods, laughs, small talk. Introverts often skip half of it. Not because they're rude, not because they don't care, but because they feel the need to not fill the silence with noise. They don't feel that need at all. And silence makes people uncomfortable. Silence forces people to hear themselves think. If you guys ever want to mess with yourselves in this world of fast-moving dopamine, I see this trend sometimes where people just raw dog 15 minutes. So just raw dog 15 minutes of your life and try it out. So silence, like I said, makes people feel uncomfortable. Silence forces people to hear themselves. That's the reason introverts get disliked. They don't help others escape their own thoughts. Most people use conversation as emotional regulation. Talking keeps anxiety down, talking fills the space, and talking reassures them that they're accepted. And introverts don't always play along. They don't jump in immediately. They think before they speak. They listen more than they react. So the other person starts projecting. Are they bored? Did I say something wrong? And why aren't they responding like everyone else? And instead of sitting with that discomfort, people turn it outward. They decide that the introvert, the person not talking at all, is the problem. Another reason introverts get disliked is that they break social scripts. There's an unspoken contract in a lot of social settings. Smile, laugh at the right moments, you ask very surface level questions, and you pretend, this is the important part, you pretend to be more interested than you are. And introverts, in general, are terrible at pretending. They'd rather say nothing than say something fake. They'd rather stay quiet than perform enthusiasm they don't feel. And they'd rather disengage than lie however they need to. And that honesty reads as rejection. Someone who relies on social energy to feel validated, an introvert's neutrality feels like judgment, even when it's not. Introverts aren't judging, they're just conserving their own energy. There's no reason for it. So, in a world that's extroverted, energy conservation looks like disapproval. There's also a myth that being quiet means being weak. And somewhere along the line, we confuse confidence with volume. The loudest person in the room is often the most confident is a lie. So if you speak softly, people assume you lack authority. If you pause before answering, they assume you're unsure or maybe you're stupid and you don't know. If you don't jump into debates, they assume you have nothing to say. In reality, introverts just think slightly more deeply and they don't broadcast every thought that comes across their brain. But in modern culture, it doesn't reward this kind of depth that they have. It rewards immediacy. Fast responses, hot takes, instant opinions. Introverts operate on delay. They process everything. They want to understand before reacting. They want clarity before they commit to anything, and they want meaning before noise. And that delay makes people impatient. Impatience turns to irritation, and irritation eventually turns into dislike. Another problem is introverts make insecure people feel exposed. If you're constantly talking, joking, explaining yourself, and someone else is just sitting there calm and unreadable, that makes the situation itself feel kind of unbalanced. The insecure mind fills the gaps. You might think that they're better than me, that they're judging everyone, or that they're stuck up. And none of it's true because insecurity doesn't care about the truth. It cares about comfort. Introverted people don't rush to reassure people. They don't constantly signal approval, and they don't over-explain their intentions. The lack of reassurance becomes threatening to people who need it the most. There's also this power dynamic that people don't talk about, and silence holds a lot of power. The person who talks less often controls the pace of the conversation. They decide when to respond, and they don't reveal all their cards. People don't like when they can't read you. If they can't predict you, they can't control how they're perceived. So they label you instead as you're antisocial, maybe you're awkward, or you're cold. And labels are a way to reduce uncertainty. It's easier to dismiss an introvert than to accept that not everyone exists to entertain you. Everybody has this main character syndrome thing. The irony is that introverts are often deeply empathetic. They notice tone shifts, they pick up on tension, and they remember some of these details that people don't remember. They just don't express care in loud, visible ways. They show it through presence, through listening, and through being consistent. But those things are invisible in a culture obsessed with performatism, if that's a word. Obsessed with performance, whatever. If you don't post it, say it, or announce it, it might as well not exist. And introverts don't announce themselves. That's why they're often misunderstood at work, too. They don't speak unless they have something worth saying. They're not the guys that dominate meetings, and they don't self-promote themselves. They don't self-promote themselves aggressively. That sounds like okay English. So they get overlooked. Not because they're incapable at their job, but because they don't advertise competence. And when someone doesn't advertise themselves, people assume that there's nothing there, which is wild when you think about it, because some of the most thoughtful, strategic people are introverts. They just don't shout it. People also dislike introverts because introverts don't chase approval from other people. They're okay being by themselves. They don't need constant social reinforcement, and they're okay sitting with themselves. That independence triggers people who rely on external validation. If you don't need the group itself feels less powerful. So instead of admiring that independence, people punish it socially. They exclude, they mock, and they label. It's subtle, but it's real. Now, the part that introverts need to hear, you're not disliked because something is wrong with you. You're disliked because your presence disrupts how people regulate themselves emotionally. And that is not your job to fix. You don't owe anyone entertainment. You don't owe constant enthusiasm, and you don't owe fake warmth to anybody to make them comfortable. The right people don't need you to perform. They'll respect silence, your insight, and they'll respect the fact that you understand that depth doesn't always announce itself. And the people who dislike you for being introverted, well, they were never responding to you in the first place. They were responding to the fact that they are uncomfortable in themselves. Silence isn't a flaw. Calm isn't arrogance, and distance isn't rejection. Sometimes it's just someone who knows themselves well enough not to fill every moment with noise. In a world that's terrified of being alone with its thoughts, that's going to make some people uncomfortable. So let them be. Fuck them. You don't exist to be universally liked. You exist to be you. You exist to be real. And people will always be offended by that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Peace out.